Hey, it's great to see each one of you. You hearty folks, you're awesome coming out on a day like today. You're amazing, and I am so happy to see you today. And all of you online, I welcome you. It is a joy to worship the Lord together. Today is Valentine's Day, let me remind you of that, and it is below zero, so great day to go home and stay by the fire a little bit here. And I just want you to know the Bible's the most exciting book in all the world. I mean, it has the most exciting, most thrilling stories you could ever imagine. But there are some sections where it's just historical, and that's where we're at with the Prayer of Jabez. We're seeing this guy who is listed in First Chronicles with all the history of, and it's a family tree and all these names, 500 plus names just listed. But then the historian comes to one and he pauses and he says, Jabez was more honorable than his brethren. Jabez was more honorable than his brethren, for his mother named him Jabez, saying, because I bore him in pain. We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that some kind of tragedy happened. And more than the pain of childbirth, I think it was something great, and she gave him the name Jabez, which means pain. How would you like to have a name like that? It really meant causes pain. And it was a difficult time in her life. We do know that in the Israeli culture, the father named the child. And we see that again and again. But here it says his mother named him. We don't know if the father had abandoned the family, if the father had died. We just don't know the situation. But we know it wasn't good. And it was sorrowful. It was difficult. And this was Jabez's lot. But he was more honorable than his brethren. And honorable means respected. He stood out. Why? Well, verse 10 tells us that Jabez called on the God of Israel. He called on God. He was a man of prayer. He sought God. And not just off-the-cuff prayer. I mean, this was the theme of his life. He had heard that God had done miracles in Israel's past. And he is calling on God. He's calling on God to do something special in his life. He asked God for 4 things. Oh, that you would bless me indeed. He asked God for blessing. Blessing. This is not just a light request. I mean, the indeed word makes it strong. It's like 5 exclamation points. It's like all capitals. It's like, God bless me a lot. Not just a trickle, showers of blessing. God, I got to have your blessing. It's a strong request. He's asking, oh God, bless me. And then, Lord, enlarge my border. Here he's asking for a greater life, a greater influence. Lord, I want to do more for you. I want to be more for you. This is the utmost of ambition. He's not saying, God bless me so I can have this cush life and have it made in the shade. No, he's saying, bless me. Why? So I can be a blessing. Just like we saw with Abraham in Genesis 12. God said, I will bless you. You will be a blessing. God blesses you. God blesses me. Why? So I can have this comfort, life of comfort. No. God's more concerned about my character than he is my comfort. And he wants to make you a blessing. He wants to make us a blessing. And so Jabez said, bless me. And then he said, influence. Lord, I want some influence. I want to touch lives. I want to make a difference. And then he said, God, if I'm going to do this, I can't do it in my strength. I've got to do it in your strength, your power. He said that your hand would be upon me. That your hand would be upon me. This is asking God for his strength, his power. I need your hand. I need your strength. I can't do this in my strength, God. There's no way I could do this. I need power. And then he asked for protection, that you would keep me from harm. You'd keep me from evil, that it might not grieve me. And so put your hands like this. Can you do that? Just cup your hands and say with me a word. Blessing. Can you say it? Blessing. Okay, now put your hands like this. Just about that far apart. And then widen them and say influence. Influence, yes. And today we see the hand of God. Just put your hand out like this, like it's God's hand, and say power. Power. I need power. Do you need power? The Christian life's not a hard life to live. It's an impossible life to live. God does not ask us to do hard things. He asks us to do impossible things. All the miracles of the Bible took place not in a hard situation, but in an impossible situation. And that's exactly where Jabez is. I mean, he comes to the plate with 2 strikes against him. I mean, he's saying, God, I can't. It drove him to his knees. You know, I got an illustration of this, and I've told you this story before, but it's so good I got to tell it to you again. When my kids were little, we lived over here in the Highlands, and one day, to give Mom a break, I took the kids out, and we went out for ice cream. Yeah, it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. And we went to Baskin-Robbins for ice cream, and while we were there, I noticed, and we went to the downtown one right by the campus. I don't know if it's there, even there anymore, but we went to the Baskin-Robbins, and I noticed that they had a bike that they were going to give away, and they had a drawing, and so I filled out a little slip for each one and put it in the box for each one in our family. And a few weeks later, we got a call, and lo and behold, our 3-year-old little boy won that big 26-inch bike. Oh, my lands, he was pumped. And so we all went down, and there he is standing by the bike. Oh, my lands, isn't that amazing? He's not even as tall as the bike. And he was so excited to win that bike. And I tell you what, in family prayer that night, he prayed the most amazing prayer. And he couldn't say his S's very well. And he said, Jesus, thank you for my 10-peat bike. And he said, and you can write it because you're big enough. Oh, my lands, I love what kids pray, don't you? It's just so cool. You should write a book someday, what kids pray, you know. It's just awesome. But then the deal was, he said, Dad, I want to go around the block on my bike. Well, there's no way he could ride it around the block, you know, on his own, his feet long ways from the pedals. But he wanted to impress everybody in the neighborhood with his new bike, you know. It's called influence. and so, you know who had to help him go around the block on his bike? Yeah, yours truly, right here. And you can see us. There we go, around the block. And I've got one hand on the back of the seat, one on the handlebars, and we're going around the block. And we go around once, and he says, again, Dad, let's go. We got to go. Hey, this is work, you know. But it was fun. Here's my point. There is no way in the world a little 3-year-old boy is going to take a 26-inch bike around the block. He had not the ability to do that. He had to have God's hand. He had to have Dad's hand on that bike. And in this case, really hands, you know. He had to have Dad's hand. And I'm here to tell you today, there is no way. I mean, there is no way I can do what God's called me to do. You can do what God's called you to do apart from God's hand. I just know it's so. And this is the way God has designed it. And Jabez understood it, and partly maybe because his start in life was so difficult. But he knew God had done miracles for Israel, and he's saying, God, I need a miracle. I've got to have your hand. I've got to have your power, God. Somebody said impossible situations set the stage for amazing miracles. How true that is. A God-sized dream will always be beyond your ability. God is calling you to something you cannot do. I heard somebody say one time, God will never ask you to do something you can't do. Oh, my lands. That's exactly what he does. He asks you to do what you can't do. That's the Christian life. That's serving God. The great achievements were first and at one time a dream. God gave Jabez a dream. I want something different in my life, God. There's got to be something special. You cannot experience success, someone said, without risking failure. That's scary, isn't it? I mean, Jabez could have just played it safe. Somebody said there's two ways to live. One is playing to win, and the other is playing not to lose. Playing not to lose. But you know what? Jabez played to win. He said, God, I just want something from you. And that's scary because you're risking failure, you know. He wasn't playing it safe. And Satan has two primary tactics. One is discouragement and the other is fear. And fear, we all battle fear. David said in Psalm 34, I sought the Lord and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. So David battled fear. Joshua battled fear, if you read Joshua chapter 1. Moses battled fear. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? And so fear is a part of responding to God's call. And the alternative to fear is not good. I mean, you can play it safe, but the alternative to fear is boredom. You know, I read one time the number one problem in our churches is boredom. And I thought, what? How could we be bored when we have the most exciting book in all the world? How could we be bored when we serve the creator of the universe? How could this be? A dull life. Listen, Jabez's life was not boring. And when you respond to God and you serve God and you step out by faith, I'm telling you, God will do some things in your life. You begin to say, God, bless me. God, and give me a greater influence. And God, put your hand up. I'm telling you, if you're alert, you'll watch. God will bring people across your path. And things will begin to happen. God will open doors and you begin to see, wow, God is working. Now, with Jabez, he had a rough start to life. And maybe you're saying, Pastor, I struggle with some pain. You don't know what I've been through. And I just want you to know that's our life. It's not easy. And we live in a difficult day, a difficult world. And I want you to know that adversity is often the seedbed of opportunity. It is often the seedbed of opportunity. Adversity sometimes is a blessing in disguise. And we don't see it that way, but somebody said rough seas make great sailors. You know. Paul wrote to the church at Philippi, and in Philippians 1:29, he said this, for to you it has been granted, for Christ's sake, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer. But also to suffer for his sake. To you it has been granted. The word granted there it means to grant a favor. That's what it means. As if I gave you a gift. It's like a gift. God, I don't consider my suffering a gift from you. But oftentimes adversity is a blessing in disguise. It is our word in the Greek, charisma. It's our word where we get charismatic. It means gifted. I am gifted by God with my suffering. What? That's what he's saying there. To you you have been gifted. The Apostle Paul made such a great impact for God. But did you know that he came to God 3 times and asked God to heal him? because of his physical ailment. He said, God, would you take this thing from me? 3 times. And here's what God said. God said, no, I won't. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Wow. Paul said, okay, I'll boast about my weaknesses so the power of Christ may dwell on me. I need the power. I will just rejoice in my weaknesses. And it became a source of strength for Paul. Paul wrote to the church of Philippi and said, I can do all things. How, Paul? Through Christ. Through Christ who strengthens me. And that's why we emphasize here at Calvary 3 things, our passion. And I just want to mention, know God. Know God. This is the key to living, coming to know God and getting to know Him. It's your relationship with God. It's not about a religion. It's about a relationship. Know God. And then secondly, be transformed. Be transformed. Romans 12. Be not conformed to the world, but be transformed. Find freedom. Freedom for the work of God. This is how the work of God is done. Not in our power, but in His power. This week I'm reading through the Old Testament, and I read through the book of Ezra and then the book of Nehemiah. Both of those books were written after the deportation of Israel. You know, Israel came into the promised land, and then years later they departed from the ways of God, and it's a long story, but God, they forfeited their right to the promised land. And in 721 BC, the Assyrians conquered the 10 northern tribes. And then in 586 BC, Babylon conquered the 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And they were taken to Babylon. 70 years in Babylon. After the 70 years in exile, they came back. That's the book of Ezra. Ezra is coming back. And Ezra has one purpose, and that is rebuild the temple, the beautiful temple that Solomon had built many, many years before and was destroyed, leveled. And so his job was to rebuild the temple. 4 times in the book of Ezra. And it just jumped out to me because I knew I was talking this week to you about the hand of God in the Prayer of Jabez. And 4 times Ezra says the hand of God was upon me. Here it is, Ezra 7:28. Thus I was strengthened according to the hand of the Lord my God upon me. Ezra was strengthened for what God had for him. He did it in the strength of God. And it was not only the rebuilding of the physical temple, but there was a spiritual movement under Ezra. And we see that in the next passage in chapter 7. He says on the first, well, let's just in the beginning, because the good hand, or in the middle, because the good hand of his God was upon him, for Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to practice it and to teach his statutes and ordinances in Israel. And so you see, God's hand was on him not only to build the actual physical temple, that was important, yes, but it was also the hand of God was upon him to study the law, which means the Bible in that day, to study the Word and to teach the Word to the people so that there might be a spiritual movement. Not just the building, but a spiritual movement among the people. And so Ezra says, the hand of God, because the good hand of God, the hand of God was upon him. This is power. This is power. This is Ezra saying, God's strengthening me. God's helping me with his call. First thing we see is power. The second thing the hand of God, I think, represents is provision. Provision. When God gives a vision, he gives provision. He provides. Someone said when God guides, God provides. Hudson Taylor put it this way: God's work, done God's way, will never lack God's supplies. God's provision. God has a way of providing. I don't know about you, but I need His provision. And when you step out and follow God, Lord, I need provision. I just need your provision. Ezra said it in Ezra 7. Here it is. The king granted him all he requested because the hand of the Lord, his God, was upon him. The hand of the Lord was upon him, and God is providing. And in fact, after Ezra was Nehemiah. Nehemiah went back after the 70 years captivity, not to rebuild the temple, but Nehemiah went back. And in that book, the story is the rebuilding of the walls around Jerusalem. And Nehemiah says the same thing. God provided for him. The king granted them to me because the good hand of my God was upon me. The king provided. This is God providing for Nehemiah everything that he needed. When God guides, God will provide. When God gives a vision, God makes provision. God's work, done God's way, Hudson Taylor said, will not lack God's provision. What a great God. Nearly 48 years ago, 5 of us met in a home. We had a dream. That's all we had. We had nothing. I mean nothing. And God has provided. And I mean, on and on, He has provided. What an amazing God. It's just, I mean, the stories of God providing. When I did my book, I had so many stories. My daughter, who was our editor, said, "Dad, you got to pick out the best. You can't just put all these stories in it. It's too much." You know, but God has done so much, and God has provided so beautifully. He's amazing. We've seen it recently with a few years ago, our school was in incredible deficit. I mean, if you knew how bad, you wouldn't want to know. And some 300,000 plus in deficit. And so God's work done God's way. I just said, God, what are we not doing your way? And so we made some changes, and then we had a new leader, and he worked with us a little bit through the summer, and he had signed a contract to be our principal for the year. And the teachers came out to my house on a Friday, and we had lunch together. And then after they left, he said, "Can my wife and I talk to you?" We sit down at my dining room table. School's going to start next week. And he said to me, "You're not going to make it." And he said, "We're going to bow out." I said, "Are you telling me you're quitting?" He said, "Yes." I stood to my feet, pushed my chair back. I said, God will provide. I had no idea how he was going to provide, especially now that I didn't have a leader. And I walked to the front door and I opened it. If I come to your house and you walk to the front door and open it, the conversation's probably over, you know. And you know what? Here we are, going to be 3 years later. God has provided every need. In fact, school hasn't survived. It is thriving. We have 40 plus more kids this year than we had last year. And we're seeing God's hand in an amazing way. And God has provided every need and then some. It is so exciting. My God shall supply all your needs. That's what Paul wrote to the church at Philippi in response to their love gift to him. He said, God's going to take care of you in every way. Ezra saw it. Nehemiah saw it. These are people who stepped out for God to do the impossible. Jabez is praying for it. God, bless me. God, widen my influence. And God, put your hand on me. I need strength. I need power. I need provision. Not only power and provision, but one more thing. I need protection. Protection. We see it, Ezra talked about it in Ezra 8. Then we journeyed from the river Hava to the 12th of the first month to go to Jerusalem. And the hand of our God was over us. And he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from the ambushes on the way. He's talking about his journey from Babylon all the way back to Jerusalem. God, help us, protect us all the way, keep us safe. And he said God's hand was with us. He protected us all the way. He protected us. This is protection. And when you step out for God, you will be attacked. And you'll be criticized, in fact. Some people... And we will look at this more next Sunday, because that's the fourth thing. He says, oh, that you would keep me from evil. And God answers that prayer. I want you to see this verse in closing. 2 Chronicles 16:9. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth. Can you picture that? God looking, searching, questing. The eyes of the Lord looking throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those. He's looking for people he can strongly support. That he may strongly support those who are so gifted, who have such great ability, who are so righteous and perfect. Is that what it says? No. Strongly support those whose heart is completely his. What is God looking for in my life, in your life? A loyal heart. That's what he's looking for. He is looking for a loyal heart. And God granted Jabez what he asked. Lord, blessing, influence, power. I need these things, God. I need these things. And he called on the God of Israel. Let's do that right now. Let's call on the great God that Jabez called on. In your heart, would you pray with me? Our Heavenly Father, we bow before you now, and we thank you so much for recording for us these great, great stories of the Old Testament people of faith. How you use them. How they are an example to us today. We know these are recorded as an example for us. May we glean some great things from them. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. I'm asking you to join me in this prayer. Maybe you have yet to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior.